Pet owners in Virginia, concerned their animal may someday be the victim of a dog napping, want the General Assembly to tighten up on the way dog pounds sell stray animals. After 5 days, pounds can now sell unclaimed animals to private citizens or to licensed federal dealers. One Northern Virginian testified today his dog was stolen and then shot to death when ads offering a $500 reward appeared.
I hope that by creating a law such as they have in Pennsylvania, which is why the dealers come here, because their own state won't allow them to buy dogs from the pound, that it will keep these dealers from being able to come down here, making it prosperous for them to do so, to buy dogs in large quantities.
The bill now before the full Senate would limit the sale of unclaimed animals by dog pounds to accredited buyers, such as universities, or to private citizens, provided no more than 2 animals go to any one person in 1 month. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The committee did decide to eliminate the state sales tax on home heating fuels this July, but they did not cut the state sales tax on food, one of the most controversial measures before the 81 Assembly. Governor Dalton had threatened to make drastic cuts in his next budget if the bill passed. It was what the bill's sponsor called blackmail from the governor, and coupled with an uncertainty over our financial future, it eventually led to a 12-3 defeat of the idea.
I'd like to see it done, and I would support it. But I certainly can't support anything that's going to take over $200 million in revenues in the next biennium, and without replacing those revenues and without telling us where we're going to cut the service.
And some wanted to wait for details on the money plans of our new president and their possible effects on Virginia's economy.
None of us know what the president is going to suggest in his cuts. We all know that Virginia will be affected. In my opinion, Mr. Chairman, it is not the time to do it.
By failing to act on 2 other tax-cutting bills in this last week of the session, the committee also put to rest plans to eliminate the tax on non-prescription drugs and a Robin Hood bill, which would have shifted the tax burden from the poor to rich Virginians. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
That would provide...
The announcement was designed to show the public support Baliles has for his candidacy. In a room filled with state legislators and prominent civic leaders, the 39-year-old floater delegate became the state's 2nd Democratic candidate. As Bath County Delegate Chad Solomon had done in his announcement, Baliles also denied he wants the job merely as a stepping stone to the governor's office.
I served in the Attorney General's office for 7.5 years. We did not let politics come into play with the rendering of legal advice and in the handling of lawsuits on behalf of the Commonwealth. That would be my goal in the Attorney General's office.
Baliles reminded the audience the Attorney General is allowed to run for 2 consecutive 4-year terms.
At the end of that 4-year term or an 8-year term, if my record makes it advisable for me and my friends to consider running for some other office, I would not rule it out.
As for the important backing of Richmond's influential Main Street financial wizards, Baliles said he'd look for support on Main Street, in Grundy, in Roanoke, and anywhere he could find it. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Police figure either the bus driver was ill or a mechanical defect led to the crash, which took 10 lives and sent 14 Fredericksburg area residents to the hospital. The driver, Carl Earl, may have suffered a heart attack as he returned his passengers on their daily commuter run. Earl died in the crash, and results of an autopsy won't be known until Friday or Saturday. As for the bus, investigators from the Federal Highway Safety Board and state transportation officials haven't completed their examinations. In clear weather on a dry pavement, the bus slammed into a guardrail, slid along it for 100 feet, and then struck this bridge abutment. Witnesses say the bus then shot up in the air and plunged 50 feet down into the creek bed.
Approximately 5 o'clock. It was, couldn't be more than 10 minutes after the accident occurred.
What did you find when you got here?
When I approached, I found a bus lying on its side in the water. There were rescue people on the scene when I got here, and they were in the process of pulling individuals out of the bus.
The dead were brought to a temporary morgue at Mary Washington Hospital. Family members came and made positive identifications. The Fredericksburg area medical examiner was called in to determine preliminary causes of death.
Most of these people died of massive head injuries, flail injuries to the extremities, sudden application of massive G-force, and a few we suspect may have died by drowning. Apparently went over the bridge, impacted on its nose, and fell on its right side, and the bodies were recovered from the bus.
One of the owners of the D&J bus company says Carl Earl had been an extremely good bus driver, that he had never been in a bus accident while he worked for the company. She added they perform a maintenance check on each of their buses daily. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Speaker of the House A.L. Philpott sounded the gavel at 8:46 p.m. as the House and Senate agreed to adjourn. The two chambers had agreed on the $277 million supplemental budget bill, but the last-minute efforts to cut out the state sales tax on non-prescription drugs were killed. Most of the bills passed by the Assembly now await action from Governor Dalton before they can go in the law books. A.L. Philpott is a freshman Speaker of the House. After adjournment, he told me it's been a very, very difficult transition.
One that's caused me much problems, and I'm sure that the action of the Speaker is not in the tradition of what has gone on in the House before. But it's very difficult for me to absolutely separate myself from the floor where I spent 22 years before I went where I am now.
Delegate William Robinson, Jr., son of a veteran delegate who passed away this year, thanked his colleagues for making his difficult transition, replacing his father, easier.
Everyone has made me feel a part of this body, and I look forward to coming back when we reconvene and working with you all for the betterment and growth of the Commonwealth. And I thank you.
Thank you.
The books closed on this 30-day session of the 1981 General Assembly. The legislators adjourned with 3 hours and 14 minutes to spare. But they'll be back in Richmond March 30th for a special redistricting session, and they'll stay in town that week for a veto session approved by the voters in Virginia last November. Reporting from the Assembly, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Surprisingly, members resolved their differences and were able to adjourn 3 hours before their midnight deadline. Their most important accomplishment was approving a $277 million supplemental budget. Most of that money will go to education, Medicaid, and transportation. Governor Dalton's signature is the only thing standing between Assembly-approved measures. These include making mass murder punishable by death, boosting from 18 to 19 the minimum age for buying takeout beer, authorizing Medicaid payments for abortions, a separate state holiday honoring Martin Luther King Jr., and severely restricting circumstances under which anyone below 18 and mentally incompetent can be sterilized. Bills which died in the 81 Assembly this year included removal of the state sales tax on non-prescription drugs, halving the state sales tax on food, raising the interest on credit cards to 24%, boosting the speed limit from 55 to 65 miles an hour, and permitting citizens to submit their own laws to the voters on a statewide referendum. In all, just over half of the 1,666 pieces of legislation which came before it was passed by the General Assembly. To date, Governor Dalton has signed only 23 of those bills into law, included a measure specifying the maximum size of stickers on car rear windows and removal of outdated prohibitions against riding mules on the sidewalks. Dalton will sign many of the remaining 643 bills which please him. Those he opposes, he will either veto or take no action on before the March 23rd deadline, thus making pocket vetoes. But this year, that's not the end of the story. The governor has officially called a special session of the General Assembly for March 30th, when the lawmakers will reapportion the House, Senate, and Congressional districts, and under a voter-approved constitutional amendment, they'll have the chance to override any vetoes or pocket vetoes the governor has imposed. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
The Virginia Democratic Party is in violation of the Voting Rights Act at this moment for failing to pre-clear changes affecting voting under Section 5
Virginia Beach lawyer Paul Goldman outlined charges of the state NAACP that allege the Democratic Party may be diluting the voting strength of black voters in their switch from a primary to convention method of selecting candidates. At the same Capitol News Conference, Jack Gravely released a letter he's written to the U.S. Justice Department asking them to force the party to comply with the requirement to get clearance for changes in their convention plans. Simply put, those changes are designed to get more delegate representation from outside the urban areas of Virginia.
In essence, we understand that one state party Central Committee woman made a statement that if we don't go to a convention and adopt these rules, the only thing we're going to have in the Democratic party would be those city people. Now, is that the new code word for black folk participating in the Democratic primary around the state of Virginia?
Gravely repeatedly said the NAACP is not against the convention method of selecting candidates for statewide office. He is, however, against any convention rules which would tend to discriminate against black citizens or black voters in Virginia. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. When a Jew claims to believe in Jesus, he is sure to generate controversy. That's what Marshall Rosen says. He's the leader of the nationwide Jews for Jesus movement. The New Jerusalem Players, a touring group of 5 members, is in Richmond this week bringing their message to local Christian churches.
Who are we? We're Christians, but we're also Jews. Jews for Jesus. What do we believe? That Jesus is the Messiah and Savior of all.
That he died for our sins and rose again, that we're saved by grace through faith.
How long has Jews for Jesus been around? Since about 32 A.D., give or take a year.
Believing in Jesus is a fulfillment in my Jewishness. As a Jew, we wait for the coming of the Messiah. Well, through Jesus, we see the Messiah has come. We believe that if more Jewish people knew what the message of Jesus was, there would be more Jews for Jesus today.
Parents, they thought, if it made me happy, but they still didn't think that I was, still Jewish. They still think I was, converted or belonged to the Gentiles. So they were a little taken aback, but, they still loved me.
Rabbi Jack Spiro of Congregation Bethlehem told Eyewitness News the concept of a Jew for Jesus is totally unacceptable within the Jewish tradition. He said it's like oil and water. The two cannot mix. The New Jerusalem Players are on the road for 18 months at a time. Their next stop, Washington, D.C., where they'll again insist you can be Jewish and believe in Jesus at the same time. At the Ray of Hope Church, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
Talking a little bit...
Charles Cayce is not a nationally known psychic, as was his grandfather in the early part of this century. In fact, peer pressure made the young Cayce reject the paranormal beliefs shared at his breakfast table daily. His friends thought his supernatural background a bit strange. While working for his psychology degree in California, Dr. Cayce was exposed to documented cases of psychic ability, such as this film of a young woman moving a metal cylinder across a table without touching it. He studied the increasing interest in the effects of the mind on the body. Today, he's president of a psychic association in Virginia Beach.
I think we all have a little bit of it. It's like maybe musical ability or an athletic ability. There's some people who think for whatever reasons are born with lots of it and without much practice can demonstrate lots of it. Many more of us are maybe born with a little bit of it and with some practice can begin to use a little bit of it.
Whether most people can digest the thought of supernatural abilities is questionable, but Dr. Cayce's audience at an MCV lecture was fascinated with the possibilities. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
In favor of doing it, but
the governor spent a lot of time relating what he learned about the effects of the Reagan budget plan while he was in Washington earlier this week. Dalton pointed to planned elimination of federally funded school lunch programs for kids with family incomes over $15,630 a year. Though he's still analyzing how the budget cuts will affect state programs, Dalton snuffed out rumors he plans a general tax increase to compensate. On another subject, the governor defended a reception for coal operators in honor of Attorney General Marshall Coleman and his bid for the governorship. Coal industry leaders recently pumped some of their money into the Chuck Robb for governor effort. Dalton made reference to his own campaign while pointing out Coleman's backing.
I was having a great deal of difficulty, as you'll recall, with the, quote, Main Street group, many of whom had signed up with Andrew Miller in 1977. Many of these people who were on Miller's side and simply told me that they had already committed to Miller, are now supporting Marshall Coleman.
The governor said he's very pleased with the just completed General Assembly. He indicated he's had several legislators and quite a lot of mail urging him to sign or veto the bills providing Medicaid money for abortions where rape, incest, or fetal abnormality is a factor. But he's still concerned about finding the money for the added programs.
I'm going to look at every program that anybody might consider to add, to have Medicaid start picking up, and we'll be analyzing them. But I just don't think that many of you realize the magnitude of this problem.
As in years past, Governor Dalton is refusing to tip his hand on which bills he will or will not sign before the March 23rd deadline. But to date, he said nothing to indicate he's changed his mind to support the funding for Medicaid abortions bill. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Shoesmith has already been fined $100,000 and two of its employees were sent to jail for past involvement in bid rigging on state road contracts. The company's president is in Florida and local officials have no comment on the settlement. Another road building firm, one of the nation's largest, has agreed to pay the state $800,000 for its alleged part in the widespread scheme. Ashland Warren Incorporated of Delaware is charged with illegal bidding on $13 million worth of Virginia contracts. Attorney General Marshall Coleman calls the settlements very favorable.
This is not an indictment of an entire industry, but there are enough cases here for us to see that there was a widespread pattern around the state and around the country. And we believe that this sort of fairly swift and fairly severe response to it will put an end to it.
As part of the settlement, both companies will be reinstated on the state highway qualified bidders list, but will remain on probation for 5 years. The $800,000 Ashland Warren settlement is the largest to date involving state road paving contracts. Attorney General Coleman says the state is being repaid for any damages it may have suffered. Investigations are continuing from federal and state authorities into the bid rigging practices in Virginia. More settlements to come. At the Highway Department, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. There are 5,346,279 people living in Virginia, according to the census. 250,000 live in Richmond and Petersburg. Norfolk has the most residents, and the tiny city of Norton in southwest Virginia is the smallest. The census shows Henrico second only to Fairfax in county population. With fewer than 3,000 citizens, Highland County is the most sparsely populated area of the state. But these figures are for more than just bragging rights. The General Assembly will use them to make sure all Virginians have equal representation in Congress and in the local legislature, no matter where they live. Ideally, each of the state's 10 congressional districts should have 10% of the statewide total. The figures show the 3rd district, including Richmond, Henrico, and Chesterfield, needs to grow a bit, but the 4th, including Petersburg and Colonial Heights, is closer to the mark. Each of the state's 100 delegates should have 1% of the statewide total population to represent. The Chesterfield Colonial Heights District 36 has almost twice the ideal population for a House member to serve. So adjustments will have to be made for equal representation in the 80s. Statewide public hearings begin Monday with a special session of the Assembly to even things up on the 30th. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The cost of attending the university plus room and board will jump by $995 for the 1981-82 school year in a move just approved by the Board of Trustees. This amounts to the largest increase in a single year since the university's founding 141 years ago today.
The level of tuition here at the University of Richmond is a very great concern to us. We have a great deal of empathy for the people who have to pay the tuition bills. At the same time, I would point out that the University of Richmond really remains a very good buy in the academic marketplace because our tuition and fees compared to other similar private institutions are really quite low.
Most of this university's 4,000 full and part-time students come from the northeastern United States, home of the nation's top schools, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford. So even a $6,700 a year tuition here will save their parents money compared to the average $10,000 a year tuition at their home schools.
I imagine I'll be transferring the year after next. I'll probably be back here next year, but if they increase it another 19% in 83 or whatever, it's going to be abominable. I don't think many people are going to stay for it. It comes to a point where you have to consider if you're getting out as much out of the school as you're putting into it.
Hopefully I'm going to be going to graduate school at a state institution where tuition is so much less.
Inflation and a commitment to quality education are the main reasons cited for the tuition hike by University President Bruce Heilman. But parents are affected by inflation too, and it's their commitment to higher education which may have to change in the years to come with the prices. At the University of Richmond, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
95 on the south.
The state wants the next leg of the circumferential highway to have 10 interchanges, plus a route connecting it to the present Richmond-Petersburg Turnpike. Former U.S. Transportation Secretary Neil Goldschmidt rejected all but 4 of the access points, one each in Henrico, Hopewell, and Prince George counties, and one at I-95 south of Petersburg. Goldschmidt disapproved of the turnpike connector, said special efforts must be made to assure minority firms be given work on the road, and that the cities of Richmond and Petersburg be given veto power over any future modifications. Well, that was all the opinion of former Secretary Goldschmidt. Ronald Reagan's transportation man, Drew Lewis, is getting an earful now from the State Highway Commissioner, Harold King.
I see a real movement of the new administration to place the responsibilities on the states and give them the maximum authority in these areas. That is coming across from 2 different meetings we've had with both the Secretary and the new Federal Highway Administrator, Mr. Barnhart.
King is respectfully requesting reconsideration of the former Secretary's position on 295. He has the written support of Governor Dalton, who calls for the withdrawal of the federal regulations he says have plagued the Beltway, and more GOP support from the freshman Richmond area Congressman Tom Bliley. He told a state capitol news conference anything would be an improvement over the Goldschmidt proposals.
I would hope to explore this further with the officials in Chesterfield with a view towards trying to get greater interstate mileage for Chesterfield County, the fastest growing county or one of them in the state and in the nation, and with all of the traffic problems inherent in that kind of growth situation.
Richmond, Petersburg, and Chesterfield officials have remained opposed to the Beltway because of the expected drop in traffic volume on I-95, which brings a lot of business through their localities. But Commissioner King says in the end, they'll be glad the Beltway was built. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
And I think this is the thing that
This is potentially a powerful piece of energy. It works fine in machines designed to burn coal, such as stoves and furnaces. But when you try to power your car with it, that's a different story. It would be nice if you could just load your gas tank with lumps of coal. But the technology to turn it into gasoline has been around for quite a while. In fact, the Germans powered their World War II aircraft with gas squeezed from coal. At the time, oil was cheaper than creating synthetic fuel. Today, Virginia's Fuel Conversion Authority is trying to come up with the money needed to build a synfuels plant in Montgomery County, coal country. Price tag, about $1 billion. The administration change in Washington and confusing federal regulations have brought more delays in the process. At today's meeting, Virginia officials were quite literally left in the dark.
They're going to have to amend their ordinance to include the definition of life.
It was a touch of ironic symbolism when power was accidentally cut to the west wing of the General Assembly building in the middle of a session on energy. Even after moving to another room, the authority was still unable to shed any light on the situation and adjourned without taking any specific action. Coal is the key to the recommendation Governor Dalton will make as his input toward a national energy policy. Though its realization is still some time off, production of synthetic fuels will certainly enhance the value of Virginia's abundant resource, coal. At the General Assembly Building, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. For the last 2 years, the State Council on the Environment has been making annual agreements with the Environmental Protection Agency to coordinate joint state-federal programs to help solve problems involving Virginia's air, land, and water. Next year's agreement goes into effect this October. Officials are beginning to gather public opinion on the environment through questionnaires and meetings across the state. The Council's assistant administrator has preliminary results from a citizen survey.
Top issues identified so far are hazardous waste, nuclear waste, water quality in general, and farmland preservation.
A relatively new problem this year has stemmed from the recent wave of wood stoves and the smoke they produce. One day, an assistant school superintendent thought his Highland Springs office was on fire because of all the smoke, but it was just coming from wood stoves burning in the area.
On cold days, when there is no wind, it becomes uncomfortable, even working in that building. That is during the week, not even on the weekend. I know that we must conserve petroleum and that wood is one of our great renewable resources.
Taylor admitted he didn't have a solution to cutting down on wood stove pollution, but just wanted to let authorities know about the difficulties people with respiratory problems are having. President Reagan has indicated his support for environmental programs. What EPA officials here couldn't predict was what effect his economic recovery program could have on Virginia's programs, but they hope any serious budget cuts won't come until 1983. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The fact that there were few bills introduced affecting local government in the 81 session was reason enough for the Virginia Municipal League to be pleased with the action of the legislature. This year, only 482 bills were of interest to state localities, compared with the usual 1,000 or more in previous sessions. Representatives from Virginia's cities, towns, and urban counties were told major gains were made in the state budget-making process. Local schools got $60 million more from Assembly action, a move the League calls very responsive to education needs. They were pleased the sales tax on non-prescription drugs was retained and that legislation which would have cut city income from taxation was killed. But more attention was paid to the Ronald Reagan recommendations.
There are several programs which will affect Virginia localities in the areas of school aid, social services, sewage treatment plant, construction funds that will have some adverse effect and will mean a diminished program capacity at the local level.
League members are understandably concerned about the effects the Reagan budget cuts will have on Virginia localities. But on the other hand, they welcome indications the federal government plans to back off and let them handle their own affairs. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. U.S. District Judge George Warriner has refused to stop next Wednesday's scheduled execution of James Briley, convicted on 2 counts of capital murder and 1 of first-degree murder last year. Judy Diane Barton, her common-law husband Harvey Wilkerson, and their 5-year-old son Harvey Wayne were slain in October of 1979 at their North Richmond home. Briley was also convicted of rape, robbery, and firearms violations in connection with the murders. His lawyers claim Briley's trial should have been moved outside Richmond because of the publicity caused by James and his 2 brothers, Linwood and Anthony. The trio was responsible for at least 11 murders in 1979, according to Richmond police. Counsel also alleged a mistrial should have been declared when jurors returned with conflicting capital and first-degree murder verdicts. Their third contention, that police interviews with co-defendant Duncan Meekins were suppressed, thereby violating Briley's constitutional rights. But the federal judge said Briley had ample opportunity before the Virginia Supreme Court to argue these points. He added the Richmond media had acted responsibly in reporting matters of public record during his trial. Judge Warriner seemed unimpressed with defense arguments that James Briley's execution date be stayed or that he be released from prison. Assuming Briley still wants to live, his lawyers will now take the case to the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals and to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary. At the federal courthouse, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
Today, I am a candidate for governor of Virginia.
Marshall Coleman has had his eye on the governor's mansion for 4 years since he was elected Attorney General of Virginia, but he's carefully avoided discussing his candidacy. Well, now he can talk openly about the race and granted Eyewitness News an exclusive interview.
Mr. Coleman, first of all, let me express our appreciation for our viewers for you taking time out to talk with us about the upcoming campaign and about your candidacy for governor.
Glad to do it.
Mr. Coleman, why do you want to be governor?
Well, I'm ready for the job. I think I have had proper preparation for the toughest decision-making job in Virginia. During my service in the House of Delegates and in the State Senate, I cast thousands of legislative votes. As Attorney General, I have rendered thousands of decisions affecting the law. And I believe that that record is open to the public so that they can know where I stand and can judge me. And I think it's a record in which the people of Virginia can have confidence.
Why should the people of Virginia choose you as their next governor, do you think?
Not only is my philosophy one that is in tune with the people of Virginia, but I think my experience gives me really the best preparation that anybody could have to serve as the chief executive. On a daily basis, I have been in touch with the governor, with the cabinet, with all the agency heads, and with state government from top to bottom. I have seen firsthand the legislative process in both houses, and I have been the only full-time statewide office holder serving during this administration.
Your term as Attorney General, you've been seen by some political observers as comparatively liberal in your views. Some say you're less conservative than your likely Democratic opponent, Lieutenant Governor Chuck Robb. To win the gubernatorial election, these same observers say it's more important to be conservative than Republican in Virginia, even though the state has voted Republican in recent statewide and national elections. How do you respond to this assessment?
I think that my record is one of being an authentic and genuine conservative. I am not the person that campaigned for Jimmy Carter. I'm not the person that will be campaigning for whoever wants to defeat Ronald Reagan in 1984. I'm not the fellow that wants to take Virginia down a new and different course. I'm the candidate that represents continuity with 12 years of Republican leadership that has served the state well.
You've had several innovative ideas set forth for introduction to the General Assembly. It seems that the legislators have seemed reluctant to go along with you on a lot of these ideas. Assuming most of the same lawmakers will be seated in 1982, don't you see that you might have a problem convincing them to support your ideas as governor?
The important thing is being able to come up with a program, to introduce it, and to fight for it. Now, you're not going to be able to get what you want or what you think is good for the people adopted overnight. Change takes a while in Virginia. But I think obviously that the governor of the state is in a much more effective position to get legislation adopted than is the Attorney General. The General Assembly and the governor over the past 12 years have gotten along well. That's a tradition that's not going to be abandoned during the next administration.
Sometimes in political campaigns, the people turn out the big losers because the real issues are never really discussed. Tomorrow, in Part 2 of our special report, we'll ask Marshall Coleman specific questions about specific issues. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
Virginia has a good thing going, and we're going to keep it that way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Coleman says he plans to continue what he calls the good state management brought to the governor's office by Republicans. There were no indications he plans to make substantial changes in policy toward major issues discussed during an exclusive interview with Eyewitness News.
So our viewers can get a general idea of your thoughts on various topics the governor has to deal with. I'm just going to mention now some subjects. I'd like you to comment on the status of the subject today and what you'd like to do to change that status, if anything, if you're elected governor. The level of taxation, we've had some bills in the previous General Assembly dealing with income tax, dealing with tax on drugs, tax on food. How would you feel about that as governor?
We're now witnessing long overdue and unprecedented tax cuts. We can't be sure what their implications will be for Virginia, but we know they will affect revenue coming into the state. I think until we know clearly what that impact will be, it would be unresponsible for me as a candidate and would be premature to promise tax cuts at the state level that I know we cannot afford.
On the topic of energy,
I was able just a few weeks ago to go to the Supreme Court on behalf of the state of Virginia to argue against regulations that the Carter administration had imposed on our coal industry at a very time when we're trying to become energy sufficient. These regulations had the effect of putting many of our miners and coal producers out of work. I'm hopeful that we will win that case and that there'll be more reason in Washington and that some of the regulators can be reined in so that we can get the fossil fuel out of the ground, produce it, and burn it.
The relations with the federal government in Washington.
Well, I think that we have seen an entire change in atmosphere in the last few weeks. We have been able to accomplish more by cooperating with the new Reagan administration in the few weeks it's been in office than in all of the 4 years the Carter administration was there. We never got a sympathetic hearing when the Carter administration was in office. I don't care whether it had to do with our industry in Newport News, that is our shipbuilding industry, or whether it has to do with the coal regulations or any other kind of matter that brought us into confrontation with the federal government. We have to always take it to court.
The race for the governor's mansion this year is expected to be a tough battle. Tomorrow, in the final segment of our special interview, we'll ask Marshall Coleman about the upcoming campaign and his plans for Virginia if he's elected. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.
The campaign has just begun, and already Marshall Coleman is challenging an unannounced opponent.
Let me extend this invitation to Chuck Robb. I not only think we should debate, I think we should start now to campaign side by side and to let the people see where we stand and where we differ.
I asked Coleman about the upcoming campaign during an exclusive Eyewitness News interview.
Are few people willing to predict a clear winner between yourself and Mr. Robb this fall, if you do indeed turn out the candidates? It's expected to be a close race. There have also been predictions by some already that it could be, on both sides, a dirty campaign, mudslinging, things like that. Do you anticipate a really hard-fought, tooth-and-nail race for the governorship?
I think it'll be a hard-fought and competitive campaign. I think that'll be good for the candidates. I think it'll be good for the state. I think that we want to let the people of Virginia see where we stand and how we differ. I think we have an obligation as candidates to offer and compare our ideas on how we would serve the people of Virginia as governor.
Will the term mudslinging be applied to the campaign, you think?
Well, I don't know whether it will. I don't think it will be applied to me, because my aim will be simply to talk about the issues and not about the personality.
Party lines have failed in the national election to hold traditional support lines in the recent election. However, Republicans traditionally have been hard-pressed to get major support from blacks and blue-collar workers. How important your chances in Virginia is support from the segments, and do you anticipate endorsements from such groups as the Crusade for Voters or labor organizations or traditionally Democratic supporters?
Well, I think I'm going to get votes from all segments of Virginia. It's been the case in the past that the leadership of the unions has always seen fit to endorse my opponents, but I think that many of the rank and file working and producing people of Virginia will support me in this campaign just as they have in the past. I'm going to conduct a campaign that will seek out all the people, that will try to be in service to all the people.
Some say you were the prime candidate for the Republican gubernatorial nomination from the day you were elected Attorney General 4 years ago. Some critics have called some of your actions in this office since then early campaigning for governor. In fact, the largest single issue being cited by those seeking to replace you here is the claim that they won't use the office merely as a stepping stone to the governor's mansion. How do you feel about those allegations?
The public is perhaps heard it so many times now that they don't put much credence in politicians accusing other people of being political. I think this is election year rhetoric. It doesn't add anything to the campaign, and I think it obscures the necessity for talking about what to do and how to do it.
Marshall Coleman is young, attractive, energetic, and a candidate for governor. But those same words describe our Democratic lieutenant governor. He'll make his announcement tomorrow, and Eyewitness News reporter John Saylor will begin a special report on Chuck Robb. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The Reverend Curtis Harris of Hopewell noted Virginia's population is 20% black, but there are no blacks among the state's 10 congressmen. Therefore, Harris urged the committee to redraw congressional boundary lines to create a new South Side district with a large black population, which could then elect a black representative. The Virginia NAACP has the same objective, but a different method.
We think it is time that a black or relatively black congressional district should be carved out within the state of Virginia.
Michael Brown suggested Hampton and Newport News be included in the 2nd District with Norfolk and Portsmouth. One Northern Virginia senator questioned the use of race as a factor in redistricting.
Does the NAACP seriously contend that a congressional district deliberately drawn to put the largest possible number of blacks in one congressional district would pass constitutional muster? Is it your position that we could set about to do what you are asking us to do constitutionally?
Well, you could try and then see what happens.
This Senate committee will meet next week to pre-file their recommendations on redistricting and then hold more public hearings the following week while the General Assembly is in a reconvened session. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. In 4 years, Virginia's highway maintenance money will run out. In 6 years, money for highway construction will be gone. These dire predictions are contained in a proposal the Highway Department is submitting to state budget officials. The main problem, according to Deputy Commissioner Leo Busser, is declining revenue from the gasoline tax because people are still driving less than they used to. The 2 cents per gallon tax increase, okayed by the 1980 General Assembly, was supposed to help out, but Busser says the money just isn't coming in as fast as it should. So Virginia could lose up to $875 million in federal funding for highways by 1988 because the state won't be able to provide its matching share. The Reagan administration could reduce this matching amount, but it's still doubtful Virginia will have enough money to live up to its part of the bargain. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Areas shaded green have increased in population since the 1970 census. The tan areas have declined. But for equal representation in the House, the delegates have to represent about 53,000 people each. Instead of moving the people, a special House committee is going to move the district boundaries. Because Richmond's 5 delegates represent only 44,000 people apiece, according to last year's census, something's got to go. The delegates hope it's not one of them. Richmond's Frank Hall appeared
on behalf of an endangered species. That is, a seat in the House of Delegates in the city of Richmond. We would not hesitate to suggest a number of alternatives.
Richmond Henrico floater delegate Jerry Baliles is running for Attorney General this year, so his seat would be up for grabs if, as Delegate Hall hopes, the committee decides to keep the floater seat in the House. That way, if Richmond's 5 seats are cut to 4, the 5th delegate could run for the floater seat and everyone could keep his job. The public hearings are completed. The House committee now faces the monumental task of redrawing the state's House districts. But even when they're finished, the state's black groups have indicated they'll go to the U.S. Justice Department if they feel the interests of black Virginians aren't fairly represented. That could delay this November's election. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Behind this window, Governor Dalton's making up his mind on which bills he'll sign and which bills he won't. He has until midnight tonight to make up his mind. The governor had a busy weekend signing 212 bills into law. These include elimination of the sales tax on home heating fuel this October instead of next year, tightening up on gold and silver dealers, restricting circumstances under which people younger than 18 or mentally incompetent can be sterilized, permitting the state to be sued for damages in negligence cases, allowing husbands and wives to sue each other, and requiring inmates to earn time off their sentences rather than having good time granted almost automatically. Governor Dalton admits this year the prospect of a veto override gathering of the General Assembly has affected his method of disapproving legislation.
There's some bills that I would have vetoed in previous sessions that will be amended this time.
Governor Dalton says the mail and phone calls coming into his office have indicated overwhelming support for a veto of the King bill. By taking their advice and killing the King bill, Dalton has further entrenched support from Virginia's conservative right-wingers, but may have alienated much of the black support Republicans have been getting in recent statewide elections. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Expanding funding for Medicaid abortions and a statewide holiday honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were killed by the governor because the Medicaid bill was aimed at helping women who could least afford to terminate their pregnancies in cases involving rape, incest, or fetal abnormality, and because the King bill was designed to memorialize a slain civil rights leader. The state's only black senator sees the vetoes as detrimental for the poor. Richmond's Doug Wilder saying he's disappointed Governor Dalton hasn't seen the light as a governor of the 80s should.
If he considers this right, then that's a conscience that he'll have to live with. The people will be the ultimate judges as to whether they consider it right or not. And I predict that they will react.
A reaction of the people could mean a shift of black voter support away from the Republican Party this November. GOP gubernatorial candidate Marshall Coleman has immediately indicated his approval of the King veto. And a spokesman in Democratic candidate Chuck Robb's Northern Virginia campaign office has reaffirmed Robb would have okayed the bill had he been in office. Both the King bill and Medicaid legislation still have one final chance for passage. If supporters can gather enough votes between now and next week, the reconvened session could override Governor Dalton's vetoes when the members return to Richmond. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Crime solving begins with an on-the-scene investigation. 40 to 50% of the time, police find fingerprints on guns, knives, and doorknobs. Then it's just a quick check with Computer Central in Washington, and minutes later, it's book 'em Dano. At least that's what most people have learned from the movies and TV.
And that's untrue. It looks nice on television. It helps solve the crime, makes the plot a little shorter. But in truth, if they do not have a suspect, then they do not have a chance of matching the latent print.
In reality, once an arrest has been made, fingerprints are taken and a print card is put on file in the locality of the arrest. Later, if fingerprints are found at a crime scene, say in Richmond, police have to check 250,000 cards by hand. And those cards are just from Richmond. If the criminal's card is on file in Henrico, chances are Richmond police would never find it. The state's Public Safety Office wants the 1982 General Assembly to spend $2.2 million on a new automatic fingerprint information network computer. And then prints from all over the state could be put on microfilm and indexed.
We will make that available to all the localities. Every law enforcement agency in the state will be have access to this system to take their unsolved crimes, their latents, and match them to our central file here in Richmond to solve those crimes.
Alan Barnes told the commission the money saved by solving more property crimes alone would pay for the computer system. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Representatives from commissions, departments, museums, and schools from across the state are presenting their needs for the 1982-84 capital outlay budget to the House and Senate money committees over a two-day period. 33 agencies asking funds for over 1,000 projects. Governor Dalton, flanked by the most powerful of state legislators, listened intently. The bulk of the request comes from the Secretary of Education, more than $500 million. The Public Safety Secretary wants 15% of the pie, and the Human Resources Secretary is requesting almost $45 million. Rounding out the list, the Secretary of Transportation says he needs $26 million, $23 million for the Commerce and Resources Secretary, and finally, $18.5 million for the Secretary of Administration and Finance, Charles Walker.
Mr. Secretary, do the 33 agencies actually expect to get all the money they're asking for?
We have never funded all of the capital outlay requests, so their level of expectation is certainly not high enough to think that all their requests would be funded.
In fact, Governor Dalton says they can expect no more than $145 million total for all agencies, a far cry from the $725 million requested. And even that doesn't take into account federal budget trimming. Secretary Walker says the state will have to look at capital projects that are absolutely essential first, such as prisons and heating and ventilation repairs to existing buildings. As for what they'll have to cut back,
well, some of the new projects that are not absolutely needed would go first. We have some requests in higher education that obviously wouldn't be funded. And there would be many new facilities projects that would have to take the back seat to repairs, maintenance, and renovation.
Virginia has always had a rather conservative spending image anyway, but inflation coupled with conservatism from Washington will force General Assembly members to do some fiscal belt-tightening as never before. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Atlanta is 500 miles from Richmond, but parents and other concerned citizens responded to the rally call from the Virginia NAACP. Their feelings were best described in the words of a poem written by Lois White, titled "Children Don't Play in Atlanta Anymore."
Mothers watch with hawk-eyed vision every step their children make, for no one knows the silent stranger or what next move he'll take.
My son is watched at all times. He used to go in stores and want to go to the toy department by himself, but now I say no. You wait until I go. You stay with me.
Police and even the FBI are baffled by his ways. He strikes, he kills, he buries. No one knows his name.
We can't go out and actually catch a criminal ourselves, but we can show some united front here. Maybe through some psychic means we can flush these people out, you know? And it has to be done. It has to stop.
Of course, it's in Atlanta where 19 children have died. 3 are still missing. We are all surprised. But being surprised is not enough. Do you realize he could come here and do this same stuff?
It's a possibility that it could happen right here. There's a lot of people who don't believe it, but it could happen right here.
I have no great answers for this time of pain. I am a mother with 4 to raise. I can imagine the pain and agony each parent must feel every time the news cries out, another child has disappeared. Green is the color of life. Let us wear it in solemn support to end this strife.
The people who came to this rally say they did so to visibly demonstrate their concern. Richmonders, especially Richmond parents, feel child killing is not exclusive to Atlanta. $1,300 has been donated by Richmonders. The money is being sent to the mayor of Atlanta to use in a search for the killer. If you'd like to help, write the Atlanta We Care Fund, Consolidated Bank and Trust Company, 320 North 1st Street, Richmond 23219. Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Hampton Senator Hunter Andrews introduced the resolution, but remains opposed to a topic many are discussing today, gun control.
Is there anything that could be legislated that could prevent attempts like this?
No, I don't. I'm out in a democracy and the free movement of our public officials, particularly the president, to be with the people. Unfortunately, he subjects himself to these attempts, which are horrible, but that's what happens in a democracy rather than a dictatorship.
Buying a gun in Richmond can be difficult. You have to have a permit from the police department, which could take 2 weeks to obtain. But next door in Henrico, sources say you can get a permit in 20 minutes. Or you can drive to Chesterfield or Hanover, where no permit is required. and that's why some are calling for uniform statewide gun legislation.
I certainly hope our state legislators will get on the ball and do something about it, and I hope our Congress, our young states Congress, will institute some sort of law regulating and controlling these Saturday night specials.
Delegate Hines, at the last session, you introduced legislation that would require a better check on people before they buy guns in the Commonwealth. Do you think an incident of this type would help your chances of getting legislation passed next session?
I hate to think that it takes a national disaster of this magnitude to make people seriously considering a relatively small measure to keep handguns out of the hands of known criminals. But if it helps, I guess that's good.
I think that we have all the legislation that you need on the books now if the courts will adhere to it. It's plenty strong. There's plenty of it on the books right now.
In the regular session, 11 bills were introduced dealing with dangerous weapons. Of those, only 2 made it past the governor's desk, and neither one makes substantial strides toward gun control. Even as tragic an event as an assassination attempt is, it'll take more than that to change the minds of those who oppose gun control, and here at the Assembly, they're in the majority. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. Virginia voters had approved the session last November, and since the legislators are already in town for special redistricting measures, all it took was a bang of the gavel and the word from the majority leader.
We pioneer in the first reconvened session in accordance with the Constitution.
Governor Dalton only vetoed 5 bills, and only 3 of them stood a remote chance of being overridden. 2 were sponsored by Delegate Sam Glasscock. They would expand Medicaid funding for abortions when pregnancies resulted from rape, incest, or fetal abnormality. Glasscock never felt confident he had enough support for a veto override and decided to kill the bills himself.
Well, I felt that we probably could not override the governor's veto. I think we're in a redistricting session that obviously occupies the thinking of many members of the General Assembly. And it just seemed that it would be better to wait until next year and try again. We should have another governor at that time.
Both candidates, Marshall Coleman and Chuck Robb, say they'd sign the bills next year if elected. But in the meantime, what about women who can't afford these abortions?
I don't know, quite frankly. Some of them may have to go through with their pregnancies to carry them to full term. Others may be able to secure some private funds to help them out. But it's always difficult to work it out that way.
The remaining controversy centers on Richmond Senator Doug Wilder and his effort to set up a state holiday in honor of Martin Luther King. Wilder delayed a vote on his vetoed bill while he counts his supporters in the Senate and House. By the time the Senate reconvenes at 9:30 a.m., Senator Wilder should have a good indication of whether he has the necessary 2/3 support for a veto override. But sources indicate unless he's sure he can win, he won't try. At the Assembly, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. The final candidate for a veto override was a bill which would have moved King Day to the civil rights leader's birthday, January 15th, and removed Election Day from the calendar of state holidays. Sponsor Doug Wilder captured the full attention of the Senate with an impassioned history lesson before he gave up on the bill this year. He questioned Virginia honoring 2 Confederate heroes on Lee Jackson Day and reminded his audience of the Virginians who once practiced slavery.
They said, love it or leave it. Now, who left the country? Who preserved the Union? It wasn't General Lee and General Jackson. Is it any small wonder that some people in some quarters don't revere your heroes?
It's believed the bill could have received the 2/3 support necessary for an override in the Senate. But the delegates are up for re-election this year and apparently don't want to be tied to such an emotional issue.
I would ask that the measure be stricken from the docket, recognizing that the votes for the override of the governor's veto were not there, and conclude by saying, we shall overcome.
So the veto override session ended without a veto override. In the words of Senator Wilder to the taxpayers who voted for it, the session must seem rather hollow. At the Assembly, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News. In February, the state NAACP wrote Washington upset with Democrats' change in their delegate selection plans. Plans some believe will result in fewer minorities among delegates at next month's Virginia Beach convention. Now, the state ACLU and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference have joined in a letter denouncing private meetings Democratic leaders have held with the Justice Department.
Our contention is that all of these conferences are illegal, that the Justice Department has to operate on documentation under the law.
Curtis Harris' criticism is aimed at the leader of the Virginia Black Democratic Caucus, Doug Wilder. He says he was assured black voter interests will be protected at the convention.
I would have always thought that that would have been the concern of black Democrats and those persons who have the mantle of leadership in the Democratic Party. I would still think that the Justice Department may pay a little attention to what black Democratic leaders say, and that other people certainly are entitled to their views and to express them.
The Reverend Harris says he's more concerned about the political future of blacks in Virginia than he is about any effect his protests could have on this year's governor's race. He's afraid blacks are being phased out of the Democratic Party as they have traditionally been kept away from the Republicans. At the Capitol, Randy Davis, TV8 Eyewitness News.